All right, let's get to the very next question here for us on mailbag questions.
It's a two-parter. That makes it tough. Which one are we focusing on, fellas?
The second one's easiest to answer.
Yeah, so let's start with number 2 from TK76. If the Sixers trade away one of their 4 guards, assuming Quentin Grimes is part of that, who would be the toughest to replace given their skill set?
I mean, I think it's almost always a volume scorer. That's just a skill set that is toughest to replace. It's the one that's most in demand in the league. Because of that, I think some volume scorers end up getting overrated or overvalued at times. But what Tyrese Maxey is able to do with relatively efficient volume scoring would be the toughest to replace, I think.
It's funny because I actually think, to your point, I might be on the exact opposite end of. I think volume scoring in and of itself is maybe the easiest thing to get in the league. Kelly Oubre scored 20 points a game with unlimited shots.
I said relatively efficient volume scoring.
Yeah, if we're saying efficient volume scoring,
Yes.
That's a different thing. Yeah, I mean, look, I don't think anybody has shown enough yet to say you're harder to replace than Tyrese Maxey, right? Like it's just not. Quentin Grimes has like a month and a half of high usage ball, right? Jared McCain's played 23 games. BJ Edgecombe, in theory, is a guy who does everything, but he hasn't played an NBA game yet. So I think by default, it's Maxey, but I tend to think that you can find scorers. I just think if he gets put in a real situation with a real team around him, we'll see how irreplaceable he is again as of the start of next year.
And it's also the type of volume score we're talking about, because if we're discussing, like we just brought the example of the other restricted free agent player in Cam Thomas, he's a volume scorer too. But it doesn't necessarily mean that it's going to lead to winning, where you can see where, hey, Quentin Grimes can impact it this way. Certainly Tyrese Maxey can do both by running a team, scoring the way that he does, scoring bunches there, but also score within the flow of what the team is doing. So if it's not the right type, these guys know I love a player who can go out there and get buckets. But if it's not the type of player that's going to go out there and get buckets, then it doesn't mean much for a winning situation, especially here with the 76ers. All right, let's get to the first part of that question, which was a little bit longer. What non-starter, potentially gettable player would you eventually target for a trade that would maximize the Sixers' current guard rotation? Either a small forward who helps McCain Maxey, or power forward who makes 3 guard lineups more viable.
Trey Murphy, a nation turns its lonely eyes to you. No. So it would have to be a wing or a 4 that has at least average, but preferably above average playmaking at the position, which once you get into wing size players, by definition, there are not a lot of guys that are good playmakers. So I'd have to give that one some real thought and chew on that. I think the good news is their opening at power forward is so large that you could probably name like 10 to 15 guys. And it's like, sure, that upgrades the team. It's just because they have a shot to start or play real rotational minutes. I will say it's a bummer that the Pelicans extended Herb Jones, because that takes one of the guys off the table that I think we were probably in on and had talked the most about this offseason. So I'm right now I'm drawing a blank. I don't know about you guys.
You know what? Mine is a little less with the playmaking, but a little bit of it. And I would lean the guy that you've talked about a lot because he has been a non-starter, and that would be the Tari Eason conversation again of how he fits. He does it differently, but he impacts it so well that you could see that stuff translating to what the 76ers still need, where we discuss the defense, number one, but the 50-50 balls, the offensive rebounds, the rebounding in general to help them on the glass. And we've seen it from time to time where while the percentages don't necessarily translate to the argument, but we've seen where he is more than willing to take the shots. And we've seen where he has knocked those down from the perimeter as well. The playmaking himself, where he has done it for himself, he can do that. But then he is unselfish, where time to time you'll see him make this pass, make this great bounce pass, make this great play, make that extra pass that will lead to a bucket for the Houston Rockets, that you can see that then also translating to a starter role, more meaningful role, that I could still see that playing out for this example. And he's young enough.
No, Kyle took the one I was thinking off the top of my head. I have to go through and actually check some of these salaries. Yeah.
I mean, if you were talking less on the younger side and more on, hey, this is a guy who's been around for a bit, Jonathan Isaac would be an interesting one. Now, he's never healthy, and that's
right,
a little bit of an issue, especially on this team. But the defensive upside and versatility is still pretty impressive in spite of all that. So he's only making, I think, like $15 million. So you could potentially get to that number with like Drummond and Oubre's contracts and whatever else you might throw in there. Just a high-level switchable defender who can play a couple positions. That has some interest to me. But yeah, after that, you're really like, that's a tier in terms of the money. You're talking about like the Harrison Barnes types of the world. Or if you're on the younger side, it's like a Keldon Johnson who is just not that good, right? Or at least has been disappointing relative to what the expectations have been there. So you're either, I think you have to go one or two ways. You go for more of an Isaac type that's older and at least has some degree of that guy's proven and we know what he's going to do. Or it has to be a Tari Eason where the guy's still young enough and on a low enough number that it's a costlier trade, but you're convincing yourself it's like, all right, we're going to take a home run swing here.
What about the Doug Craig one there where he brings up Rui Hachimura? Still young, can shoot the basketball, put the ball on the floor. It's not a bad name. It would have been better to get him at that price when he left Washington.
Yeah.
Where you got him pretty much for nothing. But it's not a bad name, all things considered, for the people that we're talking about here. He's lower than the others, but not a bad name, Doug Craig. All right, Bree.
Another non-passer, by the way. Just
another
a guy
non-passer.
who just does none of that stuff. So, yeah, can shoot the ball and has shot more threes than when he was in Washington, which is a notable change to his game. But
the other guy I was thinking of, if Dallas, maybe because they're having a gap year, wants to lower their tax bill, maybe Najee becomes available. But he's young enough where he's multi-year valuable. But like I said, they have a pretty big tax bill, I think, for a team that's not really going to contend this year because of injury circumstance. So who knows?